Hi, I'm Brad Scott from Applied Design Works, and we are excited to be here today to talk to you about the development of the World Trade Center identity. I'm joined by Dobie, who is Creative Director on the project, and Elliot Scott, who is the Senior Designer. I was the account management, kind of general manager, lead on the project. And it's kind of amazing to see where we are today with this project and how it's evolved over the course of the last roughly 10 years. We are going to go on the site and point out a couple things and kind of talk about philosophically what drove the project and how it's evolved. And I think what's kind of been amazing about this project is it has been an exercise in thinking one thing and finding out another, and how that's informed the design process all the way through. So we look forward to sharing our insights with you and walking you through it. I think what's kind of cool about this whole thing actually is the fact that the people are just walking through it.
Yeah. Because
this was the ultimate goal of what we were trying to do. Is like, you have to remember when one of the main objectives of the master plan was to reconnect this whole part of Lower Manhattan back into the neighborhood. And the mere fact that like people are just walking through here is kind of indicative of what this identity needed to do. It had to like kind of be present but not impede people, couldn't get in way in front of them. It wasn't this like imposing force.
And when we're talking about identity, we're talking about this thing here, right?
This right here.
Logo that's sort of the logo for the World Trade Center, right?
Yeah.
Simple looking thing, very sort of just some lines. The simplest distillation of it is just 5 simple bars. But baked into that is a whole bunch of symbols, a bunch of ideas that link to the campus, that stand for history, that stand for the future. If you want, I can point out the details.
Why don't you point them out?
All right, let's do that. So, starting with 9/11. That's sort of where everybody, when we built this thing, started. The footprint of this logo is the same as the profile of the Twin Towers. I'm talking right here. That is exactly the Twin Towers. But from there, there's a bunch of other symbols. People see the trident. They see sort of that resilience of the trident standing after 9/11. There is the memorial pools sort of down the bottom, but there's a strong horizontal line of things coming, things building out of the ground. It's sort of a representation of these buildings that weren't built at the time, but are built now. And at the very top, there's this angle, and it's not just any angle, it's a very specific 17.76 degree angle. Why 1776? One World Trade Center is 1,776 feet tall. That references, the year of independence. This references that. It's all sort of interconnected and related, and there's a lot of sort of symbolism and love and craft put into it.
I think what's amazing is seeing it here on the site, so I've been part of creating it off-site, like that horizon follows exactly around the real space, and suddenly all the ideas that we had as just a concept are legitimate. They're real. They really represent this space, and you can really feel it. Which I always liked that logo, but I think when you see it inside, you really feel it.
We never really stood here, sort of tying it all together.
We never held it out big and looked around at it.
Even the way the buildings get bigger is the same as the way those buildings get taller. It crescendos.
Yeah, it's funny because we designed it because we had to believe it would exist.
Yeah.
And now you can really believe it exists because it does. It's right there next to each other. It's a very different feeling than when we created it. It was imagination before, now it's just reality.
It's nice to be back here. There's a sort of a payoff and a sort of connection. Yeah.
I think the thing that's also kind of amazing about it is it's like, we always talk about this, it's like kind of the start of a dialogue, right? And I love the fact that this particular application, this is probably the largest application of it that is existing on the site right now. You can just pass right by it.
But it's also there, it's teeny tiny on those doors.
Pieces.
But even though it's big here, it's actually still quite subtle.
Right, it's very subtle. So, which but it's, if you want to engage with it, you can kind of take a look at it and start talking about what it means and represents. So we didn't get into the strategy of the identity system for the World Trade Center, but at its most basic level, it's about unify and attract, right? So the unification of the site, because at the time when we were coming in to develop the identity, we had basically each one of the buildings had its own identity and was being kind of marketed separately, which was fine from the real estate perspective, but from a placemaking and continuity perspective from a visitor, there wasn't a continuous experience from the West Side Highway all the way through into Lower Manhattan. So part of unifying that was through the wayfinding. I mentioned attraction because at the time, and we've talked about this a little bit, people were at different points in how willing they were to come to the site.
Yeah.
So we talk about this a lot in the design we do. We don't just apply design for our decoration, but to drive business results. And part of that was to help all of the stakeholders, Silverstein, Durst, Port Authority, Westfield, actually let people know that it was okay to come back down. Like we knew that people were still mourning what had happened, and there's a process in doing that, but it's okay to come back down, but also to know that it was a place that commerce was going to be happening with again. So that was the whole idea of unification and attraction. Attract people to come back down, unify the site in its experience.
I don't know if you can see this on camera now, but there's hundreds of people moving right past us. They're all moving through this space, and not all of it's because of this wayfinding system, but and we're trying to sort of help people move through a fairly complex space. There's lots of levels, there's inside, outside, memorial, buildings move around. So a wayfinding system to sort of complement the architecture, sort of bring everything, uniformity, like you said there, Brad. Very simple sort of stuff up here, and some details and hidden features and designy little tricks and Easter eggs that we've baking in there.
I love that. So the logo is a shape, but it starts to take a form when it comes into the space. So even the subtle change in plane follows that 17.76 degrees, and the logo is there physically emblazed into the structure. So all of those details go into all the different corners of the space, so you can feel it.
We even drew the icon system, like the bathroom symbol and this train symbol and other sort of shopping bags and stuff. They all use the same mechanics, the same sort of mathematics as the logos, sort of to create a uniform thing. This arrow weight is not a random thickness, it matches that thickness. That line is half of that thickness. Everything's sort of very precise and thought out.
And it was interesting too, because those are the design elements, but even just looking at this particular sign, we also had security issues as well. It had to, you couldn't be able to hide things inside of it, for example. So we were talking about this, design isn't just what you aesthetically see. Design is the way it's actually fabricated, built, put into the installed and put into the ground. And like we said, that all this is not, there isn't an open cavity
There
here.
was a version of the logo where it stuck out. Remember that one?
Yeah.
And people would put chewing gum on there, so that had to be made much simpler.
So what was also really interesting about the system is, we talk about this a lot, when it launched, we had to we had to recognize the fact that the city was still in mourning to a certain degree, and we had to start talking about the commercial side of this site, and we knew that it was going to evolve. We knew that was going to evolve over time. And I think what's really interesting is when we launched, things were very hospital corners. It was very true to kind of the identity that we had created. And as it's evolved over the course of the last 10 years, and people have started to work down here, and the buildings are filling up, and as a residential neighborhood, it's back open, you can start to see that it's starting to kind of change. And this is not the World Trade Center's identity, but this is for the Oculus itself. It was work that's been done for Westfield. that has a lot more lightheartedness to it.
Bright
It has
colors, lots of energy.
lots of colors, lots of energy. When we first started the system, it was very monochromatic. It was a lot of white,
Serious, strong.
strong. It was 2 feet in the ground. It was like we always said, it's like hands on the hips kind of stuff. And what's been kind of remarkable about this project is like as people have become more comfortable coming down, we've been able to like go to like a different style that doesn't feel incongruent. We couldn't have done that 8-9 years ago.
No, of course not.
The idea of retail at that scale back then just seems so far from where we are, but now with the scale of it in this space, it looks amazing.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
And I think what's important to note is it still works, right? So
They
if
work together.
They work together.
That's the important part.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With the World Trade Center mark, with that original identity and that, and everything that went with it, this doesn't compete with it, and that World Trade Center mark doesn't compete with this. It's like the two are allowed to kind of stand together and show what's available here.
Yeah, I think when you come down this staircase and you see that, it feels like it belongs here. And I think that, to me, that tells us we did our job well. Because now people come here, they're enjoying what's here, and it doesn't feel incongruent with this part of the city. And that was what we imagined way back then that the future would be like. And for it to see it like this, it's just, I like it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's funny because it's like it's one of the only designs that it's like I'm happy to watch it kind of like recess as like new things come in, right? It's
The
like,
World Trade Center one?
Yeah, the World Trade Center one. It's kind of like it's been this arc of like very visual, very out in front, and now it's like starting to like
It did its job, and
it did
it
its job.
let other things shine.
And it still continues on in perpetuity, but its role changes a little bit.
It created the pathway for all of this to follow and flourish. It did its job well.
Yeah.
So right above here, we have one of the central features of the World Trade Center Oculus development, which is the wedge of light. If you took an aerial shot of the entire 16-acre campus, all of the buildings are symmetrical with the exception of the Oculus. And the reason for that is that Daniel Libeskind, once the foundation had been laid for the Oculus, Daniel Libeskind realized that based on the surrounding buildings and the architecture and the way the sun shines and the way the whole Oculus is constructed with the light, the way the light pours in, that on 10:28 a.m., which is the exact hour that the second tower collapsed, the light reflects off of the wedge of light, creating a perfectly symmetrical beam of light that bisects the concourse. So they shifted the Oculus by a few degrees in order to capture that light beam. And on 9/11, at that exact hour, the light just pours into the Oculus in this magnificent beam form, and it's a moment of silence, it's a moment of remembrance, and it's a moment that captures really what the essence of the property is all about. And we touched on this earlier, it's a place of connection, it's a place of community, it's a monument to perseverance, it's a place of gathering, a place where people come to work, to eat, to dine, to connect with one another, and it's a place that is captured literally into the architecture of the building.
I'm really thinking about when we were in the other building here, like looking down on this site at the very beginning. And now we're standing here looking out on it as a complete thing, or almost complete.
Yeah.
So it's just such a great feeling to see people walking around, knowing where to go, from the signage and the wayfinding.
It's a nice sort of summary snapshot. There's a memorial, there's buildings rising up, there's a shopping mall in there.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it was all about, was this project right here. I mean, was this shot. It's kind of amazing to see it. Like, and it's amazing that it's like as relevant today as it was the day we launched it. It's kind of crazy to watch how it changed, right?
Yeah.
Like how it's, like what it needed to do, how it's changed over each one of the years. And that it's like still here.
Yeah.
But when you look at everybody and you look at like the fact that like people are just they're walking through and they're paying remembrance and they're, you know, in the office buildings and they're shopping at Westfield, it's kind of remarkable.
One of the things I like as well is this is not something that we did. We sort of set up some of the foundations and some of the sort of branding work, and there's the logo there, but this is something that the Port Authority developed on their own based on our sort of stuff, and it's seeing it come its own life, and it's sort of working on its own. It's great to see.
Yeah, it's funny because like we were always imagining what will it be like when it's built, as if that was some kind of static point.
Like it was done.
Yeah, but it's not.
just
It's
the
just going to
beginning.
keep evolving, and with the retail, everything you see is just continuously evolving.
Yeah.
And so life has come back to it, and it feels really good.
I mean, I think that's the thing that like this project taught me the most was just like it. You think of things as being like kind of set in stone and static, and they're not.
Right.
Like it's constantly changing, and it has to change. And if you're too rigid in your thinking and how you approach it, it's like it feels hemmed in and like it can't breathe. And I think what's so amazing about this is like it's continuing to breathe. Like as this site like expands and as people, you know, just use the site, it's like it continues to like evolve and change, but its original idea is still there.
Yeah.
It's just that, and I think that that's kind of what was built into it. It was like, and I think that's the thing that people had a hard time getting their heads around was like, it was a system that was like built to like evolve. It wasn't a system that was built to be just like kind of like branded in with a branding iron.
It was looking forward, right? It had the past, but it has the future.
Yeah. It has the present, and I think,
present,
and I think that's kind of the most amazing part of it.
Good.
Was like when we started it, we had the past,
Yeah.
and we had the future.
Yeah, we were always looking to that.
And we were always kind of in between those two.
Yeah.
And what was kind of amazing is like I think what revealed itself to me as a person was the present, right? And I can say this like very seriously. It fundamentally changed my career, like because it was like I realized like the present was such an important component of everything that we do, and I think sometimes you forget that part of it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like it was just believing in the journey. We didn't know exactly where the journey was going, but believing in carrying on with that journey, just taking each step at a time. I feel like I changed a lot through that process as well, and bring that to all my other design projects. Is just be on the journey, and the journey will lead where it needs to get to.